Hi, this is CSProfessorPam with Jumpstart Code, and we are continuing to learn about if statements in JavaScript. We have built a little example here, and it has a problem because if I click the button without giving any input, then I'm getting this strange result. So we learned about Boolean expressions and relational operators in the last video, and we're going to now apply that to understanding how to create an if statement. So an if statement is how you can attach different actions based on a question. So the basic format of an if statement in JavaScript is we'll have if, and in parentheses you have some condition. So this is going to be your Boolean expression. This has to be a yes or no question, right? Now, we need to group together because it could be one statement or it could be multiple statements. And I am just going to start you with this pattern, which we need to use our curly bracket here to put together, to group together, what are the actions that I want to happen if this condition is true. So JavaScript will evaluate this expression. If it's true, then it will do whatever are the statements that are between these curly brackets. You don't have to have an else, but if you want to have an action that you do if it's false, then you need an else. If you just have an if statement, then if this is true, you'll do this. If this is false, you'll just skip this, okay? If you want to have a second set of actions, then you can add an else, and you are having a second set of actions here. Now, these curly brackets are really important, and it's not important in terms of syntax, but indenting this code that is inside the if and the else is really important. All right, now the problem that we're having is we want to make sure that there is something in these text boxes. And actually, it's not just make sure that there's something there, because, you know, if I put red and green in here, right, that means something is there, but it's not a number. It's not something, it's not appropriate input. So we also need to make sure it's appropriate input. So in this particular case, you'll remember that what we have done is we have retrieved the value from the text box, and we're using parse float to attempt to convert that into something that can get stored here. Now let me do a little sideline something here just in the console. If I have, for example, if I do parse float and I put in here, 54.5, then you see what I get is the number 54.5. But if I do parse float with nothing, an empty string, I'm getting this thing called NaN. NaN stands for not a number, all right? And also if I try to convert text, I'm getting NaN. So what we're going to use is another function in JavaScript. There's a function called isNaN. So again, this stands for not a number. And isNaN takes an input So this can be a variable that you've converted, and it will tell you, it will either return true. Now you have to think about this. Is NaN. So true means it is not a number. False means it is a number. Okay? So over here, if I just do a little test, let's do is NaN, and I'm going to do parse float red. Okay, so I'm trying to convert the string red to a number, which I'm not going to be able to do it. And so notice the result is true. If I do is NaN parse float 75, right? So I can convert 75 into a number, and so that returns false. So we're going to use this along with an if statement to sort out, to have some data validation here. So here's what I'm going to do. We attempt to retrieve the value and convert it. We attempt to retrieve this value and convert it. It's this part that I have to decide. I only want to calculate and display if the input was valid. So here, my next step needs to be make sure input is valid. So I'm going to put in an if statement that says if is NaN, and I'm going to put in miles, right? Remember we learned that we can use a logical operator, or is NaN gallons. So I'm saying if either one of these is not a number, then that's a problem, right? So I'm going to open my curly bracket, and in here I'm going to do alert a message that says missing or invalid input. Okay. Now, that's not quite right, but I want to test this and show you what the issue is. So that's almost what we want. So let's refresh this page. And if I click on this button, I'm getting this alert. So that's right. But I'm getting this output. I don't want to get any output if the input is not correct, right? And maybe in a future, a more detailed plan for this application, I may want to display the error message here or display the output. But for right now, we're just going to alert the message. So why did it go ahead and give me this result? Well, because there was nothing to stop it from going on and executing the rest of these statements, right? So I want to make a choice. I either want to do this one statement, or I want to do the rest of the code to process good data. So I'm going to add an else here. Okay, and this closing bracket of this else, I have to group together all of the statements that I want to basically be separated out. And I'm going to indent that over. So now we are either going to do this error message, or we are going to get a result, right? So let's see what happens here. So first of all, let's always make sure if my data is good, let's make sure it works. All right, so that still works. I'm going to refresh the page. If I have no input, if I click calculate, I get my error message there, right? And we might want to actually change, and maybe we'll change and put our error message here. But right now, we're kind of testing. If I have good input here, but and I put in red here, I get missing or invalid input. All right. So as long as I've got to make sure that I have good values in both in order for this to work. Okay. Now, since I'm doing that, we probably don't want to see this here. So let's actually make a little adjustment to our HTML. I'm actually going to take out the span, and I'm going to just let the ID be in the H2. And I'm going to leave it blank. Nothing in here to start. Okay. And what I'm going to change over here is we're going to put this number plus miles per gallon. Right? So let me make sure you understand what I changed. I decided to have, instead of a span inside and instead of having these words miles per gallon already displayed on the page, it's just going to be a blank place, right? So let me save it so you'll see. So you'll notice now there's nothing here, right? And if I put in my numbers, so we get that. And what we can do now is maybe instead of the alert, we want to display the error message on the page. So instead of this alert, I will actually use this. I'm going to copy this. And instead of this alert, I'm going to display in that, I'm going to say missing or invalid data. Okay. So now, if I don't have anything, I get my error message here. If I have good values, then I get my answer, right? So now we have added some validation to this, and we have learned the beginning of how to set up an if statement. So again, just to review what we did here, and notice I gave myself a comment to keep in line. What am I doing? I'm getting the miles, I'm getting the gallons. Make sure the input is valid. If miles is not a number, that's basically what that's saying, or gallons is not a number, then that's a problem, and I'm going to display this error message on my page. Else, I have this group of statements where now I will calculate the miles per gallon and display the result on the page. So I have two different possible actions, and the decision of which one to do is controlled by this Boolean expression. Okay. Again, remember, these curly brackets are very important, and indenting this code helps to make your entire code more readable. So you notice every time I open a curly bracket here, then I start indenting the code that is a part of that. And I open a curly bracket here, and I indent that code. So that's a very important habit to get into when you are doing if statements. All right. So make sure that you can get that done, and we'll start looking at some more complicated if statements in future lessons.